Let's talk about Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. What a tough season for the Cincinnati Bengals. Yes, they finished 9-8. They finished above 500, but it was not a good season overall for the Bengals because they missed the playoffs. As soon as the Kansas City Chiefs went out there and they put their backups in against the Denver Broncos, if you watched that game in the first half, you knew the Bengals were not going to make the playoffs. And that's unfortunate because Joe Burrow was one of the best quarterbacks this season. In my opinion, from a passing standpoint, the best quarterback this year. And if he got this team to the NFL playoffs, he probably would have won the MVP award. But when I look at the situation for the Bengals, this is a classic tale that you can have some of the best players in the league, but if the players around them aren't good enough, you can't do much. Joe Burrow this year led the league in passing touchdowns. He had 43 passing touchdowns to just 9 interceptions, and he led the league in passing yards with 4,918. Joe Burrow got a contract extension some time ago. He's their franchise quarterback. He's their best player. Joe Burrow right now is the Cincinnati Bengals. No disrespect to Jamar Chase, who was the best wide receiver this season, and the same with T. Higgins. But when you look at Joe Burrow, if he was to go down this year, the Bengals easily don't win over 3 games. He had a phenomenal season. I just want to give him his flowers. This entire offense, they did their damnness to get the Bengals to the playoffs. Sure, they had some off games here and there, but they are not the reason why this team missed the playoffs. And I want to start off with their defense before I really get into the offense and what they should do long term. When I look at this defense this season, for the first half, they weren't good. They did win their last 5 games, and the defense did look better. But it should have not taken this long for this defense to gel. You have a veteran defensive play caller in Coach Lou, who is no longer with the staff anymore. He got fired by Zach Taylor. I think the Cincinnati Bengals should do whatever it takes to try to bring in a coach like Robert Saleh, who's the former head coach with the New York Jets and is a former defensive coordinator with the San Francisco 49ers. He's one of the best defensive minds in this league. If you can't bring him in, possibly bring in someone like Dennis Allen, who's a former head coach with the Saints, was a terrible head coach, but was a very good defensive coordinator for many years with the New Orleans Saints. They need to bring in a very good defensive coach. Not only just that, I know that T. Higgins is scheduled to be a free agent. He played on the franchise tag this year. But you look at your best pass rusher and your best defensive player, Trey Hendrickson. It was a point in time this previous offseason, he requested a trade. Then he came back a couple of weeks and he just said, you know what, don't worry about it. I'll put it last year of my deal. He's going to be a free agent. You need to bring him back. He is more of a priority than T. Higgins. This defense needs all the help that they can get. And Trey Hendrickson was easily the best pass rusher this season. The man has 17.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. When you look at the numbers with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, those guys did a very good job at top of the league. But you look at Trey Hendrickson, he is their defense. This man was easily their best pass rusher and their only pass rusher that could get to the quarterback on a consistent basis. Sam Hubbard, who has been a solid pass rusher in the past, only had 2 sacks this year. He's more so of a run stopper. And when you look at the defense for the first half of the season, they couldn't stop the run. They couldn't stop the pass. I always go back to the games against Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. Yes, they have one of the best offenses this year, and they did a solid job of stopping the run in the first matchup until Derrick Henry ripped off a big run late in the game. But this defense should have not been this bad. They have the personnel in certain areas of this defense. Coach Lou really let them down. But you need to re-sign Trey Hendrickson and possibly bring in another pass rusher. Sam Hubbard was so underwhelming in terms of getting to the passer this year. And the interior with this defense has not been the same because you lost some defensive players in free agency. But those last 5 games were something special to watch if you were a Cincinnati Bengals fan because their defense finally kept them in some of those games and you still saw Joe Burrow go out there and have good moments. Myles Murphy so far has been a disappointment. Myles Murphy, 0 sacks on the season, 0 forced fumbles, was not able to do much. And he was healthy for this entire year. So when I look at Myles Murphy, this is a guy they spent a high round pick on. He's going to have to get better moving forward. They cannot afford to lose Trey Hendrickson and that production. He was getting double and is sometimes getting triple team based off of chip assignments with the tight ends. And he was still getting to the quarterback. You have to bring him back. Logan Wilson, unfortunately, missed the last month dealing with a knee injury. Logan Wilson is a very good tackling linebacker. 55 solo tackles on the year, 2 forced fumbles. He's not going to be that playmaking linebacker in terms of going out there and having high interceptions. But when you need a guy to go out there and stop the run, you go to Logan Wilson. Jermaine Pratt was their best linebacker on the year. He was tied tied 12th in solo tackles with 80, 2 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions. Very good player. So the linebacking core is solid. You can get better at the linebacking position, but I'm more so worried about the pass rushers, the run stoppers up front alongside Trey Hendrickson in the secondary. Josh Newton looked very good. And this was a man that was not supposed to be a starter this season. He came in and he gave you very good production, especially against the Los Angeles Chargers and down the stretch. You can make the case that he was their best player in the secondary, and you saw Geno Stone perform better on the back half of the season in the last 8 games. Last year, he had a career year with the Baltimore Ravens. He struggled in the first half of the year. But when you look at Geno Stone on the season, 4 interceptions, 6 pass deflections, and he had 47 tackles. Now, your safeties, they should never go out there and have over 50 tackles, in my opinion. That means that running backs are getting to the secondary. That is never a good situation. And the same with the wide receivers. You should be able to make some of those tackles in space. So even though I do like the linebackers for the Bengals, they were put in a bad situation by Coach Lou. But at the end of the day, the players do have to step up. But Josh Newton, I like him a lot. Mike Hilton, you can move off of that contract. Mike Hilton, the coverage this year was not good. And he is getting older. He is more so of a slot cornerback that you bring in certain dime packages. You want him to blitz and put pressure on the quarterback, and is a very good run stopper. At the end of the day, when you're a defensive back, whether you're a safety or a cornerback, your first priority should be stopping the pass, not going out there and putting pressure on the quarterback and trying to go out there and stop the run. And they picked on him a lot in one-on-one situations. So you can get better at that position. You can hold on to him because he's a veteran, but I don't see him getting any better long term. But at the same time, a brand new defensive coordinator could come in and get the most out of him. We'll see what happens. But you have Josh Newton. I think that he's going to be very good long-term with this roster. I really like him a lot. Cam Taylor-Britt, he gets a bad reputation because he talked a lot in the past against the Washington Commanders. He had a lot to say about the Kansas City Chiefs with Xavier Worthy. All he does is run fast. He does nothing special. And he did come away with a great interception in that matchup. 16 pass deflections on the season, 3 interceptions. He played very good down the stretch. You're going to hear that a lot in this video because the Bengals did play very well in the last few weeks of the regular season, which is so annoying because why can you have not done this from the beginning point of the season all the way through? With how this defense played in the last 5 games, if they did that with at least a couple more games this year, 8 to 9 games this year, they would have easily made the playoffs. You could have possibly saw 3 teams make the playoffs in this division with the Steelers, the Ravens, and the Bengals. But I look at Cam Taylor-Britt, I think that he's a solid player. He got burned a lot by the Washington Commanders and Terry McLaurin, sure. But you look at him in the Chiefs game, he came up big time. And speaking of the Kansas City Chiefs game, they had so many moments to go out there and win that football game. Joe Burrow did have the fumble. It went for a touchdown. It is what it is in that situation. You hate to see that. But it came down to the last play on the defense. Yet again, the defense let them down. Defensive pass interference, and it pushed the kicker right into field goal range, and he has to walk off field goal. And when you talk about the close moments with the Bengals this season, they did go 9-8. 7 of those games were decided by 1 score. The only game that they got manhandled in was against the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Philadelphia Eagles are one of the best teams in the league. There's no shame in that. But when you have Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, that should not be the case. That is one of those games you look at and say, okay, Joe Burrow had an off day and the defense cannot help him out. It's just one game. It happens to the best of them. Even the Kansas City Chiefs, they had a tough loss this year against the Buffalo Bills. But to lose 7 games by 1 score, you're in a lot of those games. Your defense just need to step up for a couple plays. That was it. When I look at the 2 losses against the Baltimore Ravens, a bunch of head-scratching decisions by Zach Taylor. The kicker did miss the field goal in the first matchup, just like how he missed the field goal against the Denver Broncos. But Joe Burrow came in. He was Superman against the Broncos. But in those Baltimore Ravens losses, they could have easily won those games. I understand that Joe Burrow had a terrible interception in the first matchup, but even in overtime, you took the ball out of Joe Burrow's hand and you ran the football with the running back. Why would you do that in that situation? You have a red-hot Joe Burrow. Let him finish out the game. And I would give Zach Taylor a lot of credit. I'm not the biggest fan of Zach Taylor because the team is never prepared for the first couple months of the regular season. They may start off 1-3. They may start off 1-4 in certain situations. But I will give him credit for this. He didn't shy away from Joe Burrow from that point forward. He let Joe Burrow go out there and he let him carry the team on his back. That is what you do with your franchise quarterback. The second loss against the Baltimore Ravens, once again, defense let them down. They went for 2. They weren't able to convert the 2-point conversion. You could say that was a bad read by Joe Burrow is a bad play call designed by Zach Taylor. It's one of those situations. And once again, not the biggest Zach Taylor fan. I said at the beginning point of the season, you could have possibly let him go because of how bad this team was performing. But you look at that situation. He went for 2. If he doesn't go for 2 and they go into overtime and they lose that game, a lot of people be saying, why didn't he go for 2? The Bengals were red hot. Why would you put the ball back into Lamar Jackson's hands? So it's one of those situations. You're damned if you do. You're damned if you don't. In that situation, I stand by Zach Taylor. Sure, the play call wasn't the best. Jamar Chase should have been the primary read. But you know what? You live and you learn. And Zach Taylor has gotten this team to a Super Bowl. And in defense of Zach Taylor, once again, they held on to Marvin Lewis for many years. And Marvin Lewis was not a good head coach at certain points of times in his tenure with the Bengals. So Zach Taylor, he deserves some more leeway. I will give him that. You made a Super Bowl a couple of years ago with a horrible offensive line that could not protect Joe Burrow, and you were just a couple plays away from defeating the Los Angeles Rams. Now let's really get into this offense, because I do believe their defense will be better. Just make Trey Henderson the most important free agent signing that you could bring back, and hopefully everything else can fall into place for the Bengals. And you have the NFL draft to go out there and fix your defense and fix your offense. The biggest elephant in the room is not Jamar Chase. They're going to pay him a lot of money. A lot of money. He's going to break the bank. Easily the best wide receiver this season. No disrespect to DK Metcalf, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson. None of those wide receivers. No disrespect to Mike Evans either. This man was clearly the number 1 wide receiver this season. He may not ever have another season like this ever again. And I hope for the Bengals sake that he doesn't. 127 receptions, 1,708 receiving yards, 17 receiving touchdowns. Triple crown winner. And you may be saying, why do I hope that Jamar Chase never has another season like this? Usually, when quarterbacks and wide receivers put up numbers like this, they're losing football games. Look at Drew Brees. For majority of his career, he was top of the league in passing because you're trying to pass your offense back into the game. You're not trying to run the football because you're down by so much. Jamar Chase will always have good numbers, but it should never be like this. Joe Burrow should not have to go out there and have over 40 passing touchdowns in the season, because your defense should be able to step up and you should have a balanced offense to run the football. I know that's not going to be the case for every single team, but to put this much pressure on Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, it's a recipe for disaster. And we saw that this year. Bring back Jamar Chase by any means. You have Joe Burrow signed in long term. When I look at T. Higgins, because that's the biggest elephant in the room right now, him and Jamar Chase, T. Higgins is a very good wide receiver. Had a very good season. 10 receiving touchdowns. We saw what he did against the Denver Broncos. One of the best defenses this season in football. Had over 900 receiving yards. T. Higgins has struggled to stay healthy in the past, this season and last season. And he wants to get paid a lot. He deserves to be paid as a top wide receiver. I don't know if the Bengals will have the money to bring back Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Trey Hendrickson. That's kind of unrealistic, because if you bring back all those players and you factor in the account that you have Orlando Brown and you have Joe Burrow, all those guys are getting paid a lot of money. The Bengals in the past has been a very cheap team. I don't know if they're going to go out there and re-sign all of those guys to top dollar value. And if T. Higgins wants to take a small pay cut to come back, which he said that he's willing to do, bring him back. But if he wants to break the bank, I can see him going to a team like the New England Patriots, possibly to a team like the Carolina Panthers. They would miss T. Higgins a lot. And I don't want to see him leave, because when you have both of these guys together, and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Joe Burrow is fully healthy, it's one of the best passing offenses in the league. But you can find some talent in the NFL draft if you let him go. And it would be a huge blow to the Bengals, but you have other wide receivers on this team that can pick up and they could come in and help replace some of the things that T. Higgins likes to do. Once again, he struggled to stay on the field. Knee injury, hamstring injury, chest injury in the past. It's not to dock him as a player, because he's phenomenal. He's a great deep threat. He's great working in the intermediate routes and underneath. When I look at T. Higgins, he can be a true number 1. I'm worried about the health long term. And at the end of the day, this is a business. And the Cincinnati Bengals, they've done a great job of selecting wide receivers in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th round. So they could possibly move on from T. Higgins, let him go to a different team. But Trey Hendrickson should be the main priority with Jamar Chase. They really should have went out there and paid Jamar Chase sooner than later because you could have saved more money. Now Jamar Chase is going to have all the leverage in the world because the man just had one of the best seasons that an NFL wide receiver could have. The offensive line is still an issue. It is not as bad as it has been in the past. You did draft Armarius Mims in the first round. You have Orlando Brown. In the past, we saw Joe Burrow have little to no time in the pocket. His first major injury in his career in the NFL was because of how horrendous the offensive line was. He tore his ACL against the Washington Commanders. When I look at it from this situation, the offensive line right now is good enough to get you over the hump. They gave Joe Burrow enough time in certain games. Joe Burrow has the mobility to go outside the pocket and make a lot of special plays. You can invest some more talent in the offensive line, but right now I think that they are good enough. Chase Brown is a solid running back. He had over 1,000 total yards on the year. He had 990 rushing yards in total, 7 rushing touchdowns, average 4.3 yards a carry. I look at it from this standpoint. No matter who the running back is with the Bengals, you're going to be okay. You're going to deal with a lot of light boxes. You're not going to deal with stacked boxes because you're dealing with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. You have 2 top wide receivers. And even if T. Higgins was to leave, teams not going to go out there and stack the box against Joe Burrow. You will be foolish. So having a running back like Chase Brown is nice to have, and the same with Khalil Herbert, but they benefit a lot because they're in a great system with the Bengals. And speaking of the wide receiving core, I want to leave you guys off on this. Jermaine Burton, 3rd round pick from Alabama, has all the talent in the world. This is a kid that has a lot of growing up to do off the field. Usually I'm in favor of the players going out there and giving them time, let them go out there and fully develop. This kid has had to overcome a lot with himself. He's dealing with a personal battle with himself. When I look at Yoshi Vash, very good player. He's a very good wide receiver. I think that he will fit in as a very good number 2 wide receiver if that time comes with T. Higgins leads. Jermaine Burton was supposed to be a breakout rookie this year. That was not the case. He was a healthy scratch for majority of the season. He missed a Saturday walkthrough. You can't have that and be a professional athlete. Listen to the first word, a professional athlete. Be a professional. He dealt with problems like this at Alabama, but he was such a beast on the field that he was able to overcome his own adversity. Nick Saban in the past has came out and said, hey, if this player grows up and he stops battling with himself, he could be a great player in the league. And that's true. He has all the talent in the world to be a top wide receiver, especially playing alongside T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. This is a great opportunity for him. But if he can't get out his own way, the Bengals could easily move on from Jermaine Burton. He's dealing with a domestic violent dispute right now. A bunch of it is just allegations, but it's more than just that. Not maturing on the field, missing meetings, not knowing the playbook. And Joe Burrow came out and he stuck his neck out for Jermaine Burton. Now you see Mike Hilton on the defensive side of the ball. He had a lot to say about Jermaine Burton. He basically said, man, we're not going to come here and babysit you. This is a business. You have to go out there and you have to want it for yourself. And I agree with Mike Hilton. He's a veteran for a reason. I know that Joe Burrow, he's trying to take up for his teammate. Joe Burrow is an awesome leader. And he's trying to go out there and help out Jermaine Burton. But you can't help a player if they don't want to help themselves. So if he doesn't want to go out there and help himself, hey, let him waste his own talent. Let him waste his own career. But we've seen this with wide receivers in the past. A couple of years later, they'll come out on the podcast and they'll say, hey, I missed the opportunity. I wished I would have been better in the past. I hope that Jermaine Burton can learn from other wide receivers in the past. Maybe he could talk with a guy like Chad Ochocinco, who was one of the best wide receivers that the Cincinnati Bengals have ever drafted. Because that's a man that will go out there and give the wide receivers a lot of knowledge, and he'll try to help coach them up. But I look at Jermaine Burton, he needs a lot of help right now off the field. On the field, didn't do much, had a lot of situations where he was dropping the football. It was just a lot of miscommunication with Joe Burrow. But Joe Burrow did not have miscommunication with Yoshi Vash, with T. Higgins, with Jamar Chase, with the tight end Mike Gesicki. He didn't have miscommunication with those guys. And you could say that, hey, he's a rookie, he's a young player, give him time. But this is the league. They're only going to give you so much time, especially when you become a headache off the field. I wish him nothing but the best, and I want the Cincinnati Bengals to be good. I do believe that one day, if management can get everything together and they can bring in the right pieces around Joe Burrow, especially on the defensive side of the ball, they will win a Super Bowl. They have a long road ahead of them because of free agency decisions and the NFL draft, but they cannot afford for T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson to leave. They have to bring back one of those players. More so Trey Hendrickson than T. Higgins. The ideal situation is for a couple of guys to go out there and take a pay cut and then possibly running back with the same roster. But we'll see what happens. But let me know in the comment section below how you guys feel about the Cincinnati Bengals, and do you believe that they will be a major threat in the AFC for years to come? If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button. Most importantly, we want each and every last one of you guys stay safe, stay positive. Thanks for the video, guys. God bless. Peace.